Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie. Welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway, where you'll learn the keys to building a profitable speaking business from speaking industry pros. Each week, we interview a great guest who will share his or her speaking journey, identify what their keys to success have been, and highlight some critical mistakes they've made along the way that you'll want to avoid. Be sure to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, sit back, tune in, and get ready to meet this week's guest.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show. My guest this week is Aeoliana. And Aeoliana is a wife, a hockey mom, a paralegal, and a podcast launch strategist and coach who's passionate about transforming your podcasting vision into something extraordinary. Using her BCAME framework, balance, communication, authenticity, mindset mastery, and empowerment, she helps you uncover your unique voice, creating captivating content, and building a rock-solid launch plan. But she doesn't stop there. Aeoliana dives, I knew I was going to mess that one up. Aeoliana dives into how your mindset influences every step, ensuring your launch with confidence and connecting with your audience in a way that truly matters. She's here to make your podcast journey both empowering and impactful, and we want to be impactful today, certainly. So welcome, Aeoliana, to the Spotlight on Speaking show.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
So we will definitely get into podcasting in a bit because that's your sweet spot, so to speak. But I want to talk first a little bit about your speaking journey. So you do a number of different things. So what type of speaker do you consider yourself? Are you a keynoter? Are you selling from the platform? Or you're just using it with local groups to, build leads and hopefully turn them into clients? So what's your slant on the situation?
I'd say I'm an in the moment type of speaker. So, definitely letting people know who I am, what I do, how I can help them. I've never really done any keynote speaking, but it sounds intriguing. But yeah, just kind of, you need me to speak on something or you want to know about something. I that's where I love to speak. That's where I love to shine.
All right. So is that mainly local groups? Is that podcast? Is that virtual summits? All the above?
So I haven't done any local groups because we haven't really had any speaking opportunities around here. But definitely podcasting and definitely summits as well. I've spoken at both of those.
All right. So what's your go-to topic when you're speaking at a summit?
It depends on the initial topic, but mostly it's usually podcasting, but definitely always has a spin with either mindset or balancing, whether it's family life with work life and passions and things like that. So those are the 2 things I mainly focus on when I'm speaking at summits.
All right. So when you're preparing for a summit, Aeoliana, how do you best determine or make sure that the message you want to share is a good fit for that particular audience? What research do you do in advance? How do you prepare for a summit so that you can put your best foot forward?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'd say that for me, preparing for a summit includes making sure that I've talked to the host ahead of time, if I can, making sure that I understand what their audience looks like. What type of audience do they have? What is the end goal that they're trying to achieve with the summit? Is it to get more people towards, their product? Is it to spread a message? What is their main focus for the summit? And then I work my expertise and what I know and what I like to talk about around that specific goal that they have in mind, so that I know that I'm not only doing my best, but I'm also going to be able to spotlight what they're trying to accomplish and serve their audience at the same time.
How do you measure the success of a summit appearance?
For me, I'm not really a numbers person. I think in past summits, the way I've measured it is if I get a comment or I get somebody saying, you know, something that you said really resonated with me, or it made me think about this particular point one way versus another way, or it changed my perspective on something. That to me is a win. Like I said before, not every summit is meant to focus on bringing in leads. Sometimes it's to spread a message. I was on a summit last year that was specifically about visibility. Um, and that summit, I mean, it wasn't really geared towards let's see how many people we can bring in, but just opening the doors to women in specific in podcasting. And I got a few comments about that, you know, people felt seen, they felt heard, and now they wanted to start their own podcast. So that to me is a win.
All right, so let's dive right into that sweet spot on podcasting. So I'm excited to have you as my guest. You've obviously been guesting a lot of podcasts. You
Mhm,
help people develop and get their own podcast launch and all that.
mhm.
So if a speaker is considering doing a podcast, what is the biggest mistake that people make when they're getting ready to launch a podcast?
The biggest mistake I've seen would have to be thinking that you don't have anything to say. So what I hear a lot from people is, my topic is, and you fill in the blank with the topic. There's already people in the space that are talking about it. I can't bring anything new to the table. So no one's going to want to listen to me because what I have to say is already being said or has already been said. And the way I reframe that for people is that your magic is not in what you're saying, but how you say it and the fact that you are the person saying it. So I like to use this example. I'm really into true crime. And so I watch a lot of like cop shows, and Law and Order is like my favorite show. You know how when people are in a lineup and they bring a witness in and they have 5 or 6 people say a phrase, and it's the same phrase for every single person. But to the person listening, the phrase is going to sound different because of the person delivering it, because there's a connection. There's something that's connecting them to what they're saying. So even though it's the same phrase, the person delivering the phrase is what sets it apart. So I like to look at podcasting and content creation in the same way. You're saying the same thing someone else has already said, but there's people that are going to resonate with it specifically because of how you're saying it and that you are the one saying it.
So how do you personally determine whether a podcast is a suitable podcast for you to be a guest on?
If it fits my topic, so if it's about podcasting, obviously, and then if it fits into what my values are, what you know, if it's something that I think I can bring in a new perspective that people may not have thought about. A lot of people tend to go on podcasts to talk about the technical aspects of recording a podcast, editing a podcast, things like that. But people don't really think about the mindset that it takes to have a podcast, the resiliency that it takes. You know, you have to be someone who knows what you're speaking about, is passionate about what you're speaking about, because those download numbers aren't going to grow right away. You're going to have to be able to know why you're doing what you're doing and stick with it through the long haul. So those are some of my criteria. And then sometimes I just see hosts and I meet them and I think, oh, wow, this would be a really fun host. Or I listen to their episodes and I'm like, oh, wow, this would be a really fun podcast to be on. And yeah, that's basically how I come up with deciding where I want to speak.
So for anyone who hasn't done a podcast, either as a guest or host or whatever,
Mhm.
pick one. Which are you starting with? Guesting, hosting, which one do you like the best?
I started with guesting. So I don't have a podcast yet. It's coming out in December. But I did podcast interviews for a whole year before I decided to launch my own podcast. And I was working in podcasts since 2020. Um, so definitely being a guest, it made it a lot more comfortable. It helped me to see what people were asking questions about, because even the hosts had questions for me. So it definitely helped me hone in on what specifically I wanted to talk about, not just in my work, but also in my podcast.
What makes for the perfect podcast guest?
I think you have to be willing to be open. You have to be willing to have a good conversation. I think sometimes people think that going into a podcast, you have to have everything scripted. And sure, it's good to have questions written down in case there's, dead air or
Almost
whatever.
nothing ever scripted.
Yeah. So if you're not scripted and you can do it, that's awesome. But there's sometimes there's people that, they feel like I'm a type of person that if I don't script things down or I don't write bullet points down for myself, even when I'm doing workshops or, master classes and stuff, I'm going to ramble. I'm going to get off topic and I need something to bring me back. And so you have to be someone who's comfortable having a conversation. Podcasting opens you up to a lot of different people that you may or may not have met throughout your life. They may be people who you never would have had a conversation with had it not been for the podcasting medium. And so I think you just have to be someone who enjoys conversation, who can carry a conversation, someone who can, think on their feet about, ideas or stories. A storyteller is a really good characteristic of a good podcast guest. And just, I guess to finish it off, just be open, like if the host has troubles or you have troubles, laugh about it. The medium is very open to being who you are and being relatable and not really pretending to make everything perfect. And so I think if you're in that boat, you'd make a great guest.
All right. So without going into great detail, because I don't
Mhm.
want you to give away all your secrets here or whatever, somebody's thinking about launching a podcast. What's step
Mhm.
number 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever?
All right. So step number one would definitely be sit down and write down 52 topics of about whatever you want to talk about. If you can't write down 52 topics, which would be one podcast a week, because there's 52 weeks in a year. If you can't do that, then you need to rethink what topic you're choosing. Maybe you're too tight with the topic and you need to broaden. Step two would be definitely figure out your why. Why are you wanting to do this podcast? Is it for monetization purposes? Is it to share a message? Is it you have something of yours, you're a coach or, digital products or something? Is there something that you want to promote? Are you just doing it for fun? Make sure you know why you're doing it. Step three, figure out who your audience is. Figure out who you want to talk to. Figure out who you're speaking to. And then step four, I would say, make sure you know what success means to you. Does success means getting 5 downloads every time you post an episode? Or is success just the fact that you recorded it and you got it out there and you felt good about it? And then step five is, step five, I'd probably say, remember to take care of yourself. Remember that podcasting, while it's a great form of communication, it can overwhelm you just like anything else can. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You are checking in with yourself, making sure, okay, don't tell yourself, I'm going to record 6 episodes tonight, because episodes, depending on how long you're going to do them, take time. So, give yourself the time and the grace and check in with yourself, and don't try to overdo it all at once. Eventually, you'll be able to do all of those things, but you can't do them all at once.
So if you're doing an interview style format podcast such as
Mhm,
this,
mhm.
do you need 52 topics or do you need 52
I
prospective
wouldn't
guests?
say I wouldn't say it's as strict with the 52 topics if you're doing interviews. I think you could make a list for yourself about the type of people you want to meet, the type of interviews that you want to do, maybe the type of topics that you'd be interested in talking to people about once you meet them. That way you have a little bit of a guideline as to what those episodes are going to be, because you definitely don't want to go into doing an interview type podcast and not have an idea of what the conversation is going to be about. I mean, you could do that and it would be a super fun podcast to be like, tune in next week to figure out what are we going to talk about today, that would be really fun if that's, the kind of thing that you want to do. But if you have a specific idea or a specific message or, anything specific, concrete that you want to talk about, you want to make sure that you have some ideas so that when people start filtering in and want to talk on your podcast, you can say, okay, can we talk about this? I've seen this a lot in the podcast groups looking for guests, where they'll outline 5 or 6 topics that they're looking for guests on. And what I do sometimes is I'll put in, when I reply, these are the things I can talk about. Do any of them fit with something that you're looking at? Even if it's not on the list they have, I'm giving them what I can speak on. And then maybe it triggers something in their head and says, oh, she can talk about that. I've been wanting to talk about this too. So that would be my suggestion if you're thinking of doing an interview podcast.
So as a podcast guest, do you have a call to action and have you tried, if yes, have you tried different ones and what kind of call to actions work best for you as a guest?
Yeah, I have different ones. So different hosts have different requirements for calls to action. My main ones are, basically join my Facebook group, go to my website is the one that works out really well, because then they have access to my blog, my freebies, my opt-ins, my resources. So that's a really good one. That's one that I use a lot, is just going to my website and checking all the things there. You get to see me, you get to see my family. Um, you know, so that's been a really good one. But I've had, products that I've given to hosts for their audiences and things like that. It just depends on what the host's requirements are and what they're okay with. Definitely make sure that as a guest you are respecting your host's requirements, and some podcast hosts don't like promoting anything on their podcast, and some do. So just make sure that that's a conversation that you, as a guest, that you have with your host, and that you, like I said, respect those boundaries.
And definitely you need to know the lay of the land before you go in. It's their sandbox and
Absolutely.
you're playing in it, so you better go by their rules. So I
Absolutely. Absolutely.
have a couple other questions I want to ask you, Aeoliana, but before I do, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie.
And we are back with the Spotlight on Speaking Show. And my guest this week is Aeoliana Elliott. And I want to roll back into the world of summits again.
Mhm.
So you've been a guest on a number of summits.
Mhm.
What do you do to increase interactivity with an audience in a virtual setting so that you can build better rapport?
So the majority of the summits I've been on, I have not spoken at live. They've been pre-recorded.
Okay.
But what I have done for myself is, when usually the host will tell me when my talk is going live, and most of them have been via Facebook. So what I'll do is I will make sure that I'm on my Facebook and I'm in the summit page, so that if once mine goes live, if there's people having questions while I'm presenting, I can jump right in there and answer their questions right away. I make sure I let them know that, hey, if you have any questions after you're watching this, send me a message, let me know what you thought, let me know if you have any questions. And I try to get back with them, whether they do it on Facebook, email, Instagram, whatever. I try to make it a priority to make sure I get back to those people and answer their questions as best as I can.
All right, so now's the bare your soul portion of the program. I want you to share a mistake you made either on a summit or on a podcast as a guest or a speaker that was embarrassing at the moment, but a valuable lesson was learned. And it would be something you would highly advise up and coming speakers, podcast guests, summit speakers, whatever it may be, not to do.
So one of my very first summits was a blogging summit, which I thought, why am I doing this? I'm not a blogger, although I have a blog, but I don't consider myself a blogger. So I created an entire presentation about the connection between blogging and podcasting. And I submitted it. And when it went live, I realized that I hadn't, it hadn't recorded any sound. So real quickly, the host sent me a message. I had to re-record the whole thing and they were able to put it in at the end of the summit. But yeah, that was very embarrassing to have something I submitted, I worked hard on, and I didn't have any sound to it. And it was a simple thing of just checking before I submitted it, and I didn't check. So I would say to anyone, it happens to all of us. I've had episodes where
I've done that.
I haven't hit record when I'm trying to record something, and I'm talking and I'm talking and I'm talking and I'm like, where's this recording? Only to realize that I have, 10, 15 minutes of dead air because I didn't hit record while I was talking. So it happens. It's okay. We've all done it. We will all do it again multiple times. And just realize that it's par for the course. I learned to laugh at myself in that situation because I don't know how many people were already tuned in to watch the first. How many people thought that it was their audio that was messing up? And then how many people were turned off by the fact that I had recorded a whole presentation with no sound.
Well, it was clearly their fault, Aeoliana.
Right? So yeah, if you go through that, just if that's what's holding you back from recording a podcast or being a guest, just know it happens and it's okay. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just always blame the tech. I always say tech is great until it isn't.
Yep. All right, so I want to give you a couple of minutes now to tell people a little bit more about how they can get involved in your world, what you do, etc. Floor is yours.
Yep. So, like Brett said, I'm Aeoliana and I'm a podcast launch strategy and coach. And the best way to get a hold of me would be through my website. So it's www.topshelfvirtualservices. And Top Shelf is like the cookie jar, Top Shelf, where grandma hides the cookies. Or my son plays hockey, so Top Shelf, corner of the hockey net. And all of my resources are there. You can tap into my blog. I release that weekly. It's actually coming out tomorrow. You can get on my email list, get my free podcast launch and tech playbook, which will walk you through how to start a podcast. I have all my resources there, free and paid, different ways to work with me. Yeah, that's the best place. So topshelfvirtualservices.com.
All right, we'll make sure there are links to the checklist and the launch guide that she's offering to people gratis in the show notes down below. So definitely check that out.
Yep.
So Aeoliana, thank you so much for being my guest on this episode of the Spotlight on Speaking Show. I wish you continued success in all that you do. May you continue to survive hurricanes just fine.
We did.
And to all the listeners out there, as always, thank you so much for tuning in today. I wish you the greatest success, and may this year be your greatest year yet. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
This has been the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway. Be sure to join us every week as we interview speaking industry pros and have them share their best tips for building a profitable speaking business. Until next week, thank you for tuning in, and remember to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com so you can enjoy even more great episodes like this one. While you're here, be sure to subscribe via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Spotlight on Speaking show. Until then, our sincere best wishes to you for the greatest of success as you work to build your own profitable speaking business.